Hi, everyone, and welcome to Fenestration Canada's Regional Week. I'm Pat Flannery. I'm the editor of Fenestration Review, and Fenestration Canada has very kindly asked me to do the MC duties, I guess, here for this. It's great to have everybody with us. Basically, the concept here is we're doing a series of online presentations. This first one is going to be targeted more for a national audience, and then over the next couple of days, we're going to be talking about more targeted regional presentations that discuss a little more specifically some of these issues at a regional level, and we have different issues we'll be getting to. The agenda is I was going to go through the agenda, but it's long. It's definitely online. I suggest if you're interested to go to the website. Basically, the way it breaks down is this. This afternoon is the Pacific region presentation on solar heat gain. Tomorrow is the Prairie region discussion of supply chain. Wednesday afternoon is Ontario region installer training. That'll be a hot one. And on Thursday, we've got the Quebec supply chain panel. And on Thursday afternoon, we have the Atlantic presentation on heavy triple glazing. Then, of course, there's our trivia night that wraps up on Thursday night, and that's going to be lots of fun as usual. And Claudio is not invited, so everyone has a chance. First up, we have the president of Fenestration Canada, Mike Bruno, who's going to join in and welcome everybody. Mike, take it away.
Thank you, Patrick, and always a pleasure to have you emceeing our events. Really appreciate the time and effort you put into it. I want to welcome everyone to Regional Week. I want to thank all the panelists and personnel that are going to be hosting such a great week. To our main sponsor, Roto, thank you very much. Their showcase will be at 11:30. Our supplier showcase sponsor, JSA Machinery, they'll have a showcase at 12 o'clock. Everyone has received a link, like Patrick said, and I wish everyone the best for this week. And I'm looking forward to listening to such great topics. Thank you and welcome to everyone. Also, as well, for those that aren't aware yet, our Windor registration is open, and our main event, which is coming back this year, for our Hall of Fame night, is on the verge of being sold out. So I suggest that you get your tickets ASAP. Thank you very much to everyone that's joined this week.
If everyone ever doubted that Mike could do sales, all you have to do is talk to him about the main event, and you'll find that you are quickly signing on the dotted line. Well done, Mike. And let's turn next to our good friends from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. CFIB is a very valued partner of Fenestration Canada. Basically, I think the way it works is if you have a Fenestration Canada membership, you basically have a CFIB membership as well. And maybe Mike will go into that in more detail. With us today is Michael Kerwin. He is the Senior Vice President of Business Development for CFIB. And also Lorena Beaumal. She is a research analyst for CFIB, and they're going to talk to us about, Michael's going to talk about some member benefit stuff, and Lorena has got some great information and research on COVID impacts on Canadian supply chains that's drawn from their discussion with small businesses across the country. So Michael and Lorena, thanks so much for joining us, and take it away.
Thanks, Patrick. Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. My name is Mike Kerwin. I'm Senior VP Business Development with CFIB. And as you may know, we've had a group agreement in place with FenCan for the last couple of years. And in that agreement, it basically says that all FenCan members have full access to all the CFIB services and savings and benefits that we offer. So I thought I'd just start with a little bit of a recap on what exactly CFIB does and some of the benefits that you can access through your membership. So these are really the four main pillars of CFIB. So, our core business has always been advocacy. But we do offer advocacy support for your group, which was super important during this COVID pandemic thing that you might have heard about. But we also can offer advice and information on virtually any business-related topic through our business counselors. We have online learning webinars and courses that we offer, and some great savings programs that we've negotiated on your behalf. So CFIB is the biggest independent business advocacy group in the country. We have about 95,000 businesses that are members of CFIB. You can see the breakdown there by province, and it's all types of businesses, whether it's manufacturers, retailers, accountants, professionals, farmers. As long as they're an independent business, they can join CFIB. The key to advocacy really is access. So can you get in to meet with the people who are making decisions that affect your business? So we have 30 people on our advocacy team across the country, and we do lobby the government at the federal, provincial, and municipal level. So you can see our president, Dan Kelly, here with a couple of politicians you may recognize. And we meet with somewhere around 30 politicians or key civil servants every week. Throughout the pandemic, we've been surveying our members, grinding through all that research data over the weekend, and meeting with the Prime Minister's office Monday afternoons to present our most recent survey results. In terms of advocacy results, we've been very involved in these business support programs that the government has come out with throughout COVID. So we've been suggesting how these programs should work, and then working with the government to fine tune these things or extend these programs as we're continue to be in this pandemic. Some of the other things on this page, business owners would be familiar with, like the capital gains exemption, but they might not realize that CFIB was the driving force behind these programs and getting the government to bring in tax measures to benefit independent businesses. In terms of our work at the provincial level, I just picked a couple issues from each province just to show you that we are very involved at the provincial levels. And same thing at municipal levels for property tax and so on. The second big pillar of CFIB is really this advice and information piece. So we have 35 full-time business counselors across the country, and their job is to answer the phone and help the business owner. So in normal times, you might get 80 or 90 calls a day from a business owner somewhere in the country who needs some help. During the pandemic, at least in the early stages, that shot up to 1,000 calls a day, which was interesting. And we had to pull about 80 people off their regular jobs just to answer the phone. Now it's slowed down a bit. I think last week we had over 1,200 calls, and about half of those were COVID related, and we're starting to see regular questions resurfacing, like workers' comp, employment standards, etc. But we do answer the phone pretty much from sunrise to sunset across the country. And we can help with whatever it is. So I'll give you a few examples of that, but you can call us as often as you like. In normal times, I would say half the calls have to do with compliance. And most business owners don't know what they don't know. There's a lot of rules out there. So this particular information piece on the screen is very popular. We can help the business owner become compliant very quickly to avoid those fines and penalties when the government inspector eventually shows up. And we've got lots of templates to help you get compliant on a wide variety of issues. In normal times, the other half of the calls we get are usually to do with something related to HR. So again, we've got lots of templates to help the business owner. I give a lot of speeches at conferences, and I usually stop and say, can I just get a show of hands? How many of you have a written social media policy that all your employees have signed? And I've read and understood the social media policy. And most people don't put up their hands. But when you think about it, it'd be a good idea. I mean, everybody's got a cell phone in their pocket. It's not hard to imagine, the boss being away and employees maybe goofing around a bit and posting stuff on social media that doesn't reflect well on the business. So these types of policies may not be mandatory, but they're still a good idea. And we have these prepared by a major law firm in Canada, at significant cost, but we share it with all CFIB members at no charge. So when you have a business related question, please give us a call and we'd be happy to help. People do call us about everything. We had a call come in about a year ago, like last winter, and somebody said, I've got an employee who walks to work. And when they get to work, they take off their boots and put them in the microwave in our lunchroom. Can I fire them for doing that? So it really doesn't matter what the question is. We're happy to help. The one on EI and family members is also very common. Again, when I'm at a conference, I'll ask, can I just get a show of hands? How many of you have family members working in the business? And lots of people put their hands up. And I say, okay, are you taking EI off that family member's paycheck? And most people, put their hand up again. So you might be surprised to know that in most cases, family members are ineligible for EI benefits. So my last question is, why are you paying the premiums if they're ineligible? And I don't know why, but business owners get mad at me when I tell them this. So if you're in that position, call CFIB. Like when this conference is done, give our office a call and we'll help you with that. So it's really a two-step process. We need to get a ruling from the EI people. Is my daughter, son, wife, brother, parents eligible for EI benefits? And it takes a while, but in the end, you'll get a response that says your family member is not eligible because they're not dealing at an arm's length with the owner of the business. And when you get that response, and that's like 90% of the time, the response that you get, call us back again and we'll help you with the refund process. And EI will go back 3.5 years on this. For a full-time employee, it works out to something between $5,000 and $7,000, the total refund. So if you're in that position, give us a call. But again, it's a good example of, business owners don't always know what they don't know. And, with respect, I've met with thousands of business owners through the years, and I found that they are very, very good at whatever they do for a living. But they're almost universally horrible dealing with everything on this page. So that's where CFIB can help. I mentioned webinars before, so we've been doing weekly COVID webinars. We buy 2,000 seats for each webinar. They're free for CFIB members and their staff. And we send the invitations out usually on Wednesday, and they're sold out within 20 minutes. And we get people coming back week after week just to make sure that they're getting the latest information on business support programs in COVID. We do other webinars as well, like the ones on this page. For online learning, we partner with a company called VU Biz, Virtual University for Business. Got lots of courses here, free for CFIB members and their employees. It's a great way to upgrade either your skills or the skills of your employees so they're more valuable to your business. This is the current list of courses that are being offered. So you'll notice, for example, WMIS training is included here. And normally you'd have to pay for that. Through VU Biz and CFIB, you can get your WMIS training at no charge for you and your employees. Last thing I wanted to mention is the savings programs that we've negotiated for CFIB members. You can imagine with 95,000 businesses in CFIB, we're able to negotiate very good deals for our members. And when we ask CFIB members how much money are they saving, on average, they're saving over $5,000 a year. So I won't go into detail on these. All the information is posted on our website. But just as an example, for payment processing, we've partnered with Chase. We have about 30,000 CFIB members using this program. And as a group, those businesses are processing between 12 and $13 billion a year through Chase. So you can imagine the rates are very good. But like I say, all the information is posted on our website. So that's pretty much it for me. I did want to hand it off to Lorena, who is our research analyst in our Montreal office. And she's going to talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on logistics and the supply chain in Canada. And then when Lorena's done, we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. So Lorena, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Michael. So hello, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation on CFIB's report, The Logistics Impact of COVID-19 on Small Businesses. My name is Lorena Bamal. I'm a research analyst at CFIB. So today I'm going to talk about how the pandemic has affected the logistics of most businesses and how some industries are particularly hard hit by significant disruptions in their supply chain. So this report underscores small businesses' difficulties and concerns, but we will focus on some of the highlights in certain sectors, such as construction, manufacturing, wholesale, and retail, which are also among those experiencing especially challenging situations. So first, I'll provide some background and then walk you through some key findings from the report. So let's get started. It's been a year and a half since the start of the pandemic, and one of the more intensely felt impacts of it has been on supply chains and business logistics. So what do we mean by business logistics? Business logistics is about getting and shipping products and managing inventories. So as you may know, COVID-19 has forced the shutdown of operations, disrupted production lines and workforces, and has also generated some delivery delays. So it's like a domino effect. Needless to say, if one link in the chain, such as a factory producing goods, is delayed because of business restrictions delay or limit production, then the whole chain is affected and may come to a halt. So there are also some events that played a role in this disruption, such as the March blockage of the Suez Canal, freight shortages, higher demands in goods, and labor shortages. For example, there is a shortage of truckers, which triggers supply chain issues also. So what's the actual situation? So as we approach a recovery of the economy, we need to be aware that these disruptions add up and slow down many affected small businesses like yours. And with the current logistic challenges on a global scale, it is important to understand the extent of their impacts on the supply chain. So for example, in the United States, back in March of this year, nearly 44% of small businesses reported experiencing temporary shortages and supply chain issues. But that being said, what is the real extent of the problem on Canadian small businesses? As all of you are probably highly affected, I'll try to give you a big picture of the situation in Canada and let you know which sectors are most affected. So in this presentation, I will present CFIB's exclusive data about how affected Canadian small business owners are by these disruptions and their implication for the future, which is really what the report is about. And in this report, we used 2 monthly surveys created by CFIB. So one is the monthly Your Voice survey, which asks CFIB members' opinion on different hot topics. And the other one is the monthly Business Barometer survey, which focuses more on the economic conditions of small businesses. And first, I will highlight the increased concerns among members as we approach economic recovery. Then I will present how and which small businesses are affected, in which sectors, and then I'll shed light on the implications of logistics issues on different levels. So since April 2020, so the beginning of the pandemic, CFIB has been measuring what worries most the small business owners. The share of concern about logistics challenges rose from 29 to 38% from April 2020 to June 2021, with a peak in May 2021, meaning it increased just below 10 percentage points in a year. Across provinces, this increase is also observable, but it's somewhat homogeneous. And by sectors, it's quite different. So for example, in June 2021, in construction, the share was of 55%. In wholesale, it was 57%, retail at 47%, and manufacturing at 48%. So all those four sectors are above the national average. So this was about the concerns, but back in April 2021, to understand a bit more the issue and logistics disruption, CFIB asked its members about the delays they experienced in the last 30 days prior to the survey. And here we can see that 55% of small business owners reported having experienced delays. And out of the 55% of owners experiencing delays, 90% indicated that they occurred with their suppliers. So it's about 49% overall of our members that had supplier delays. And about 4 in 10 were reported to be production or delivery as the origins of the delays. So now you may ask me why here it is 55%, while in the previous slide it was 38% or 41%. This is about small businesses experiencing some delays, while the other one is the concerns. So maybe some businesses experience delays, but they are not concerned by it. Here on this slide, it just shows which industries experience more delays compared to the national average, which is here in yellow. So compared to the April concern by sector, we can see that really wholesale, construction, manufacturing, and retail are really above the average by at least 15 percentage points. Again, just to clarify too, by province, it's pretty homogeneous. So it goes from 50 to 60%. So it's really similar, while by sector here, we can see it's really different. And on this next slide, I just ordered the sectors by the ones that have a bigger proportion of owners experiencing delays. And we can see that the national average shows here that the production delays is higher than the customer delivery shipping delays. And here by sectors, the 5 most affected, we can see it's the opposite. Production delays is usually lower than the customer delivery and shipping delays. But that's just a small fact. We can see also that the supplier delays is really high in construction at 96%. So now we talked about concerns, we talked about the delays, but what are the implications of this on small business owners? So one important consequence of the logistics issues is that it also affects prices. So shortages and delays have pushed up price for some goods, mainly for raw materials and metals. So for example, according to Statistics Canada, lumber increased by 52% from April 2020 and to August 2021. And primary ferrous metal products went up by 49%, glass and glass product by 13%, and then metal windows and doors by 24%. So this is input cost rise, but also doesn't take into account shipping rates that also have soared. So regarding this issue, we use data from the monthly business barometer, and we can see an increase of the share of small businesses experiencing input cost issues. So it went up from 28% back in September 2020 to 40% today. We have also some other key findings that are more recent. So for example, back in August 2021, we have that among businesses that have not yet returned to normal revenues, 46% said it was due to operational challenges. So what is operational challenges? It can be interrupted supply chain, longer processing times, cannot do or many online sales, and it can also be that shipping is complicated at this time. So as usual, the top 5 industries, without surprise, it's construction, manufacturing, wholesale. All 3 are above 65%, while the national average is at 46%, and retail is also at 54%. And we also have that in September 2021, 34% of small business owners said they wouldn't advise someone to start a business because of supply chain delays and or lack of inventory. By sector, it's quite homogeneous and really close to the average, because even if you have some supply chain delays, you can still advise someone to start a business. So the numbers it goes from 33% to 40% in construction, manufacturing, etc. And one last thing is about why we care so much about logistics issues. Well, what will it take for you to say that your business has recovered? Because this is the main topic right now. How do we recover? So, well, 44% of owners said they will be recovered from the pandemic once they no longer experience pandemic-related delays in their supplies and shipping. And by sector, you can see those 4 are higher than the average. So construction, wholesale, manufacturing are about more than 10% higher than the national average, and retail is closer, but it's still higher. So having said that, do we have any recommendations? So unfortunately, there's no ready fix or express resources available, but this research report some highlights and some solutions. But the main point of the report was to raise awareness of the problem with elected representatives. But other than that, we have 2 recommendations. So the first one will be that until the economy is fully reopened, it will be to expand rapid testing in manufacturing and warehouse settings, mainly because the number of employees on assembly lines and in distribution location will increase, so allowing production and delivery to increase. And the other other recommendations we have will be that the governments keep taxes and other costs low, and by reducing red tape, a subject we really advocate for at CFIB. So the goal here is to compensate for rising prices and some logistical issues that may impact your sales, so which should ultimately also help keep consumer prices lower. And a last maybe recommendation will be to reduce internal trade barriers. So that's what conclude the presentation. But just a small head up. Do we know when and how it will be resolved? Not really. It's really hard to tell. The good news is that the industry appears to recognize the situation and try to embrace a variety of tactics to correct logistics issues, but it will take time for sure. And as long as demand remains unpredictable and that the supply chain is vulnerable to COVID outbreaks on the other side of the world, because this is really a worldwide problem, there's no magic bullet available. There's nothing we can really do from small business perspective. So this is really what concludes the presentations. So if you have any question or feedback, feel free to ask.
Lorena, thank you very much. Really great information there. But hopefully we're going to be hearing in a minute about some proposed solutions to the problem, maybe in more of a macro scale than a lot of our members operate. But it strikes me your information there about the feeling, what makes people feel like they're in recovery. There's no question the demand hasn't been a problem, maybe for the first time in my life, in making people feel like their businesses are doing better. It's coming from the other side, and I think that's why these supply chain issues are so important, and why we're talking about them so much during this regional week. Guys, we're right up against it for time, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to skate over the questions. I believe we have the slide up there, and it will be on the recording with your contact information. So I do encourage people to reach out to CFIB, to Lorana, to Michael, if you have any questions about anything you heard here. And with that, I'm going to thank you guys, and we're going to move on to our next presentation. So thanks very much from CFIB.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Yep. Thanks, guys. All right, folks, next up, we have, I guess, our keynote presentation. We're very excited to welcome the Honorable Tony Clement. Tony Clement is a former minister in the Harper government federally and the Harris government in the province of Ontario. During his time at the House of Commons, Mr. Clement served as both Minister of Health and Minister of Industry, playing a lead role in getting Canada's economy back on track after the financial crash, 2008. In 2011, Mr. Clement was reelected for a third consecutive time. Not bad. Shortly after his reelection, he was asked by the Prime Minister to take on responsibilities of President of the Treasury Board. So key role there for sure. In this capacity, Mr. Clement led the development and implementation of a cross-government spending review, looking at transformational ways to support and deliver services to taxpayers in the most effective and efficient means possible. So thanks for that. Within the federal government, Tony Clement chaired 5 different committees of cabinet and served on the Cabinet Committee on Priorities and Planning, chaired by the Prime Minister. Mr. Clement's dedication to public service spans 3 decades. During his 8 years as an Ontario MPP, he held prominent cabinet positions in the Ontario government, including Minister of Health and Minister of the Environment. Really excited to have Tony Clement with us. And right now he's co-chairing an information and advocacy group called Reshoring Canada that I think we're going to hear a lot about here. And their mission is to secure Canadian supply chains, specifically with a focus on bringing manufacturing back home to Canada. So Mr. Clement, thank you so much for joining us, and looking forward to your presentation here.
Well, Patrick, thank you so much for the kind introduction, and it's such an honor to be part of Fenestration Canada's seminars and their information sessions today. When I was approached initially, I was the name fascinated me, Fenestration Canada, because I was in politics for all those years, and we were used to defenestration, where you throw your political opponent out the window. So I was very happy to hear that there's actually a Fenestration Canada that is a little bit more sedate than the way we use the term in politics. Anyway, I came to know a little bit about the organization, of course, and some of the issues that have been outlined to me that your members are dealing with are material and labor shortages, rising and uncertain costs, and here we go again, supply chain challenges. As the CFIB report indicated, this is something that is pan-Canadian and is affecting so many industries, including, of course, windows. Now, as Patrick outlined, one of my post-political projects, I'm basically a startup entrepreneur. That's what I do. That's my day job. But one of the projects I was working on pre-COVID had to do with the supply chain issues with critical minerals, or rare earth elements, as they're called, where Canada was getting edged out by by China and their supply chain. I used to say that critical minerals, if you want to build a fighter jet, you need critical minerals. But nowadays I say if you want to build an electric car, you need critical minerals. So this was going to be pretty key to Canada's future. Then the pandemic happened. And it became very, very clear that supply chain issues were much broader than just critical minerals, that all of a sudden we had a PPE shortage. Then, of course, we had to scramble around to get vaccines for Canadians because we did not have domestic capacity or supply chain within the economy around the pandemic period, especially the severe pandemic period. We saw so many examples of supply chain disruptions, including semiconductors for computers and vehicles, and steel, aluminum, and it just ricocheted throughout the whole economy. So I thought it was really important to have, as Patrick said, this information and advocacy group specifically looking at supply chain resiliency for Canada. So I helped create and co-chair Reshoring Canada. You can find us at reshoringcanada.ca. My co-chair is Sandra Pupatello, who sends her best regards. She was a former trade minister in the McGuinty government here in Ontario. Little bit of a different political stripe than myself, and we were trying to keep it ecumenical and bipartisan. And so Sandra and I are having a good old time working together across the aisle, whereas we were finger pointing at each other when we were in the legislature together. So that's great to be working with her. Another co-founder is a Westerner, Brian Storseth, who was an Alberta MP. And to round out the politicians, the gaggle of politicians, chairing our advisory board is the Honorable Christian Paradis from Montreal. He was my successor as industry minister and really has a real understanding of all the things the province of Quebec is specifically doing in the reshoring and supply chain area, which is a lot. Once we launched this organization, the number one response I got from Canadian industry, small businesses, large businesses, government agencies was finally somebody's doing something on this. There was a real feeling, this is back in April, that much more had to be done to secure Canadian supply chains, not to close us off from the world. I want to make that absolutely clear. This is not a make Canada great again or some sort of Canada first and foremost and forever. We understand we're part of a global supply chain, but there are instances where mindlessly just keeping to the status quo on supply chains affects our national security. It affects our public health and welfare, and of course, it affects manufacturing jobs. So we're looking for the sweet spot and giving advice to businesses and governments in that area. So what I want to do, one of our first projects at Reshoring Canada has been, just like the CFIB did, we wanted to do a survey of what is going on out there with our supply chains. And whereas CFIB focused on small business, we're looking at small, big business, mining operations, aerospace, large and small manufacturing, basically the gamut. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the survey work that we did. But first, I want to give you a sense of why this is important and some of the general statistics. These are worldwide statistics, not Canada-wide, but it gives you a sense of what's happening, particularly in the retail sector, where there has been so much disruption on supply chain during the pandemic. 56% of retailers experienced supply chain disruption during the pandemic. This is based on a global survey. 57% of companies believe supply chain management generally give them a competitive edge. If they have good supply chain management, it helps their bottom line. It helps them deliver to their customers and clientele. They understand how important supply chain management is. 70% of supply chain professionals predict supply chains will be a very key driver for better customer service. So it really is connected to, as the name suggests, it means you're supplying the best product to your customers possible. During the pandemic, 56% had to renegotiate their supply chain contracts. That's a huge number. 28% tried alternative sources. 28% also had shortages and out of stock situations. So if that's what you're getting with your folks at Fenestration Canada, you're not alone. This is a general trend, and I think, like, you're starting to see news outlets and more general discussion about supply chains. That's just the tip of the iceberg. You guys and gals who are dealing with it day to day, the research that's being done indicate that this ain't going away. This is a continuing problem and challenge, and as the economies start to heat up, it's going to get worse. I just want to talk about disruption for a minute. When CEOs were surveyed worldwide, 14% saw an increase in disruptions during the pandemic of their supply chain. 53% plan to dual source raw materials. That's a huge number. 47% plan to increase inventory of critical products, and 38% plan complete reorganization of their supply chains, and 15% plan to nearshore or reshore. There's a bunch of different names. So we chose reshore, but some use nearshore. Joe Biden calls it friendshoring because he's a friendly guy, I guess. I don't know, but there's a bunch of different terms for it, but it's basically the same thing. So now let me talk to you about the survey that we did at Reshoring Canada. So far, our sample size is over 300, which is a valid sample size. We employed Keto Magai of mainstream research. He's a Canadian research company, and Keto was very busy during the federal election, but he managed to get a lot of the work done. Now he's back on the case now that the federal election is over. And 30% of our responses were presidents and CEOs, which Keto considers that extraordinary. They're usually the busiest gals and guys out there. We expected them to slough off a survey, but a lot of them did not do that. 30% didn't do that. We surveyed people in the Ontario Mining Association, people in Supply Chain Canada, people in the aerospace sector, people in the manufacturing sector, of course. I'll send a link to your organization after this is over. We can still have more responses. We'd love to have that circulated by Fenestration Canada, get a real sense of what's going on in your industry as well. So what are the insights from our survey so far? So far, the challenges are ongoing, particularly capacity constraints, demand overtaking supply and then not being able to service that, logistics issues, containers, ports, those kinds of things. And I predict we're going to see more and more of this. There's a huge worldwide container shortage right now. And as the economies of the world heat up, that's only going to increase. With COVID, ports are becoming a huge bottleneck. And this again is not going away in the near term. Another challenge that was identified in our survey was cost instability. This may sound like something your members are aware of as well. Now, in terms of the specific shortages that were mentioned, and I think this was mentioned by the CFIB survey as well, steel, aluminum, metals, big shortages, huge shortages. Semiconductors, again, obvious. As people ordered more personal computers to do their work from home, semiconductors became a very valuable resource. And as the US and its allies move away from exposure to supply shortages on semiconductors because of the People's Republic of China that again, in the near term, means supply shortages as well. Lithium metals also was mentioned, and mold components to make molds was also mentioned. In terms of the remedies, 34% of the respondents indicated that they would like to see federal legislative changes on taxes, on supply management, on transportation. I'm gonna delve more deeply into that. I just have a top of line number from Keynote so far on that, but I will, as we do a final report on this, we'll delve into these a little bit more in detail. Almost 16% wanted to see regulatory changes on environment and other issues that are impacting on supply chain. Other issues mentioned were dealing with US trade practices. Makes sense. Labor force, and I think this is an issue with your members at Fenestration Canada too. Labor force issues, immigration issues, get more skilled labor. That was definitely mentioned. And also dealing with tariffs was the other issue mentioned. The respondents said 64% of our respondents have not reshored so far. Only 6% have relocated from abroad. But clearly, when you look at the problems that have been delineated from the survey and were repeated by the CFIB survey, then you're going to see that number change. Reasons to consider reshoring, 55% cited proximity to customers. Next was 54% saying total cost of ownership and risk mitigation were good reasons to reshore. 45% listed quality control, and very high number, I thought, 27% listed intellectual property protection. That's a very interesting number too. So those are top of line figures from our survey. We're going to, as I said, continue the surveys in the future, but I wanted to give you a sense on that. The other thing that we're working on is basically some kind of mechanism to help Canadian businesses understand the costs and benefits of reshoring. It may not work in every case, we get that, but what is the measure? How do you measure? It isn't just labor costs anymore. It isn't just transportation costs anymore. As we get more into these ESG goals, environment, social governance goals that a lot of companies are signing on to, that actually means that your supply chains have to change in a lot of cases. So we're going to try to come up with a mechanism that will help calculate. It's like a calculator, basically, help calculate the total cost of ownership and to help Canadian companies decide whether it's to their advantage or not to reshore, looking at the totality of the issues that they're facing. So stay tuned for that. We're going to start advocating to government. Patrick, we haven't started that yet. We've had some good discussions with the government of Ontario, government of Quebec, government of Canada, and the government of Alberta so far. They were kind of curious as to what we were about and what we wanted to achieve. So they're very preliminary discussions, but there's a lot of interest in what we're doing. And so, yeah, we'd like to keep in contact with your organization, your members. We want to be your advocates as well. And hopefully we can get some positive changes that will help the industry not only survive, but thrive. And thanks for this presentation. And I'm really here to answer any questions you might have as well.
Fantastic, Tony. That's a great overview of the situation. Your research is very illuminating. We've got some questions coming in. Actually, one of the what Dave Goldsmith wants to go straight back to your background in as health minister.
Sure.
He's asking about the Alberta healthcare system being close to collapse due to having less than 400 ICU beds available for a population of 4 million. Those are his numbers. What do you think of the state of the healthcare system, Tony? Just to go completely off topic.
Sure. Let's bring it on. Bring it on, Patrick. Bring it on.
Have we been did we blow it? Not having more ICU beds, not having more capacity. The concern, I remember back in the 90s was always, there's too much. There's too much. It's, and then we hit this. What's the balance? Like, how do you balance a black swan event like this versus, not that it was, everyone knew a pandemic was coming eventually.
Sure did.
How do you balance it?
Well, thanks for the question. Yeah, I was Ontario Health Minister during the SARS outbreak in 2003. Right. And then when I became Federal Health Minister, one of my first acts was to create a national pandemic plan. So because we didn't have, when SARS hit, we had no planning. That the Public Health Agency of Canada didn't even exist yet. So we did need to do better at the national level to coordinate the various health ministries and public health agencies and so on. So let me say this, having been there myself during SARS, I have a lot of sympathy for the politicians and the public health officers dealing with a situation like this, which was, unprecedented in our lifetimes. And it's really tough. You're in this fog of war, trying to figure out what to do. There's no, although we had a pandemic plan, on certain things, how to deal with situations. They felt like it was all new to them. I think there were certain mistakes made. I think we could have been a bit tougher at our borders earlier. And as you recall, the messaging was not great. The messaging out of Public Health Canada was in February of 2020, it's not a crisis. It's low risk for Canada. And then they lit their hair on fire and said, buy as much groceries as you can for the next 2 weeks. And then everybody went, that's when the toilet paper thing happened. You remember those days. I know we're trying to forget them, but that to me was a mixed message. So here's the thing about the acute care beds in my mind. I don't have any criticism of the shortage of beds at the beginning of this pandemic. I am a bit critical now. We're 18 months in and you still don't have enough ICU beds. My problem is you got to avoid the thinking where if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So we're just playing this whack for a while, for a year or more. We were doing this whack-a-mole thing of, okay, we got more cases, we got to lock down. Okay, the cases are few now, we're gonna lighten up again. It was just this whack-a-mole situation. And ultimately, because a lot of people are asymptomatic, and now with the vaccine, even more people are asymptomatic even when they get COVID, our major concern should be the number of people in the ICU units. Those are the people we want to help. There's where we want to keep capacity high. I don't care if there are 500 cases a day or 5,000 cases a day. I want to know how many people are in the ICU. Those are the people I care about. Those are the people who need real help. So why we still have a capacity shortage of ICU, in answer to the gentleman's question, that's the thing that I really would like to see really reviewed, because we have had a year and a half with this, folks. Like, okay, what's the issue? If we're gonna get the government fire hose out and start spraying money everywhere, why don't we have increased ICU capacity? I don't. Well, there's not enough nurses. Okay, hire more nurses. Well, they have to be trained. Okay, train more nurses. Spend $1 billion training nurses. I don't know. That's better than locking down the entire economy. So that to me is where I think we really have to review things, because if we just keep doing the same things, we're just going to be in this lockdown, non-lockdown, lockdown. The economy just cannot survive that. So that's a long answer to a short question, but those are my views on the topic.
And interestingly, they bring us back to supply chain, because one of the probable answers for why some of this stuff doesn't happen is, I can imagine, getting equipment and nurses for which is part of the supply chain, labor for ICUs is probably also a bottleneck. We've got more coming in, and we got to get this thing back onto our industry somehow. Tony, we're all dying actually for your perspective on this. Glass is probably the single biggest, at least primary material shortage that's facing our industry right now. It's lead times are way out. It's hard to do. And I want to frame it like this. We haven't had float glass production in Canada for over 10 years now. Guardian closed their last plant in Toronto a while ago. Now we had a Chinese company called Jinyi trying to, they made a deal with, I believe it was Kathleen Wynne's government to build a float glass production plant in Southern Ontario. That has been scuttled twice, once in Guelph and once in Stratford by, I'll put my word on it, NIMBY groups that are raising extremely spurious concerns about groundwater and stuff that really have were all addressed in the environmental reviews and addressed by the companies. In your view, Tony, are we in trouble if we can't figure out a way to make production happen and make development happen and allow manufacturing back into our communities? How do we overcome this issue of one group or another, for one reason or another, opposing everything, and frankly, municipal politicians just caving like a house of cards the minute they have 5 people in a meeting screaming at them?
Yeah. No, this is a huge question. I think, Patrick, you were the one, or somebody made me aware of the lack of manufacturing capacity for glass a couple of weeks ago when we were preparing for this event, and I was quite frankly shocked. I had no idea that we were in this situation. And to me, it's not only a customer issue; it's a security issue. I mean, if a basic product like glass not being available to Canada has all sorts of knockdown effects, economic, but also I would argue national security as well. So yes, I think this is something that has to be alleviated. And to your point, though, how are we going to govern Canada in the future where we can actually get decisions made? I mean, if it's you look at some of the gridlock in the United States Congress as an example, where it's 50-50, not much gets done, no legislation gets passed. We don't want that, I don't think, in Canada. So but times are changing. We've got to be more concerned about Indigenous rights. We've got to be more concerned about, as I said, ESG goals. A lot of corporations shareholders are demanding ESG goals as part of the corporate message and the corporate goals, and so you can't ignore those things. So yes, I think that there does have to be obviously environmental impact assessments and studies and social responsibility, all of those things. But at the end of the day, you got to be able to produce stuff. And if Canada is not a nation that produces stuff, we do not have, as we saw in the outset of the pandemic, we don't have national security, we don't have health security, and we don't have the jobs we need, quite apart from those issues. And, in the midst of a crisis, we were able to move some mountains. Like, let's give ourselves some credit. We didn't start out in a good place, but after a while, we did get PPE flowing, and we got new PPE facilities locally, N95 masks in Brockville, or nitrile gloves or whatever. All of that stuff started to be produced locally, not to a worldwide measure, but it helped alleviate the pressure. And so where there's a will, there's a way. And I think what's happening is we are waking up to the impacts of supply chain. Like, if I was at your conference in 2019 talking about supply chains, I might as well have the pocket protector in my shirt, and people's eyes would be glazing over. Okay, supply chains, yeah, sure. But now it's like top of mind to Canadian citizens, to government officials, everybody knows about supply chain. You go to the UK right now, what's the number one topic? It's the fuel shortage. It's a supply chain issue, right? So, and an issue of them not having enough lorry drivers. So, these things are starting to manifest themselves in terms of serious conversation in our country. So my view is that, it's tough to govern this country, Patrick, I get that. But I think when you frame things in the right way, that this is a national security issue, this is a health and welfare issue, then we've got to find a way to get these decisions made.
How tough is it? You spent a little time in politics. How tough is
25
it?
years.
Yeah, to just the 25 years. How tough is it when you're an elected official?
Yeah.
You know what the right thing to do is, or not even. You know that there's broad but probably quiet support for a certain thing. Okay, and I'm speaking about the float glass plants, right? Yeah. I guarantee you that 75 to 80% of the people in those municipalities would have been quite happy with a $700 million investment in 300 jobs.
Yeah.
Okay. But they're not saying anything. They're not at the meetings. They're not on TV, right? It's a vocal group, right?
I know.
How do you overcome that?
Yeah.
How do you get past that?
Okay, so yeah, and I've dealt with these in my local community in Muskoka as well. There was a very controversial power plant that was built in Bala Falls, for instance, and the world was going to end, and dogs were going to start sleeping with cats, and all sorts of bad things were going to happen. And they finally got the thing built after 13 years, and none of those bad things happened. And this is the same with our pipelines and all these other things. So the first thing you need is a process. There has to be a legit process where all the issues can be examined. Scientists can have their say. Promises can be made and then tracked so that the proponent is accountable for the promises that they've made. And then there has to be an end to the process. It just can't go on and on and on and on. So that's kind of a due process, rule of law thing that Canada has to get back to. And there's enough room in our court rulings and so on, even on Indigenous stuff, where there has to be meaningful consultation, obviously. But at the end of the day, no one is saying veto, right? So that's the good news. The bad news is, and Patrick, the way you frame the question is exactly right. The bad news is that politicians, when they fear for their electoral life, throw process out the window and say, even though this has gone through rigorous environmental, and consultation processes, we're putting this on hold for now because the pressure is too much. So, I don't have an instant answer to that, but you got to have the process, number one. And then you've got to have politicians who can rely on the process and say, look, and especially if it's 75-25, like you just said, they've got to have confidence that reasonable people looking at this will see the advantages. The worst thing to do, though, is to stop it off before you actually get to the promised land. Like, if the process just keeps grinding its gears, then the diffuse amount of the population that actually gains from jobs and from production and from capacity, they never get what they want. And then it's always going to be the worst case scenario by the opponents to the project, right? They get to keep saying that it's going to be bad if this thing is ever built because of X, Y, and Z, and you have no counterproof until the thing is actually built. So I think that's the key. You've actually got to get to the other end. And as Winston Churchill once said, when you're in hell, just keep walking. You got to get to the other side. Otherwise, you're going to just remain in hell. So I just think that that's what we're going to need in these situations.
Yeah, that's where I was going to in my mind on that with you too, is the short-term thinking. And what do you think these protesters are now going to become advocates for you and shower you with love in the next campaign just because you caved into their demands? Sorry, it doesn't work that way. They're never going to be your friends. On the other hand, people for whom you built a plant and had 300 jobs come into the community very well might be your friends next time around. So you gotta worry a little less about today's headline and a little more about down the road is sort of.
And with national politicians, a little bit easier to do that. As you get
Right.
more local and local to the municipal level, a lot tougher to do that. Let's be honest.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, most of these people don't even know who you are most of the time. I want to get a little more big picture, a little more philosophical on the supply chain thing. Believe it or not, there was a thing called the Washington Consensus. Globalization is good. Protectionism is bad. It chokes off macroeconomics, at least, with some penalties to small areas, but overall is definitely for the best. And we can probably point to the history of the 21st century or the 20th century as being proof that, at least in the broad strokes, that's correct. Back in the 70s, we put in things like the Auto Pact, and we're much more comfortable with a protectionist stance on at least in some areas. And then there was this idea that, hey, you know what? We're going to try going with China. We're going to try open trade. This we hope, we're crossing our fingers, we hope is going to cause them to liberalize their society and become good international citizens with the democracy and all that nice stuff. Tony, can we safely say now hasn't worked out? Or do we just need to choose a different place on the spectrum between protectionism and being completely open, no holds barred trade partners?
Well, Patrick, let me say, first of all, I largely agree with your historical 40-year assessment of things. So you're absolutely right. No, seriously, like you nailed it, because the Washington Consensus, the view on how to deal with macroeconomic challenges worldwide that represented, the rise of the WTO, the accession of China to the WTO, these were all events where we were optimistically hoping would lead to a rule-based world order that would lift a lot of boats from poverty. And the good news is a lot fewer people are in poverty now because of those decisions. Poverty declined by hundreds of millions of people over the last couple of generations. There was something called the Millennial Development Goals that were being pursued by the UN. And one of them was the elimination of extreme poverty by, 2030, or I can't remember what the date was. And most, when you think about that, that's a pipe dream, but we're actually pretty close.
Yeah.
We're actually pretty close to eliminating extreme poverty in the world. We may not reach it by 2030, but we'll be pretty darn close. So the fact that that's even possible indicates some of the benefits. And, we know the studies have shown, and our own historical perspectives have shown, countries that are trading with one another tend not to go to war against one another.
Right.
So it allows for a more peaceful life for citizens, all of those good things. Two mistakes, and you alluded to them both. First of all, as the world was globalizing, there were some people left behind in the advanced democracies, right? And no one paid attention to them. In the United States or in Great Britain, these were people who voted for Brexit. In the US, these people voted for Donald Trump because no one else in the political and economic establishment was paying attention to them. So that obviously created a backlash, and people used the only thing that they had to use, which was their votes. And they said, whoa, this is going too far. We've lost every job in this community. Now we're all on meth. This is not good, right? So yeah, I mean, I think there has been a reckoning on that, and there are now politicians, some call them populists, whatever you want to call them, who say, you know, come on, we got to have jobs in our own economy too. It isn't all about exporting all of our jobs to China or wherever. So that's the first thing. Second thing, as you mentioned, is China. And yes, when China was welcomed into the WTO, not everybody, but the consensus was that if we do this, China's rise will be gentle. They'll acclimate to world institutions like the World Bank and the IMF. They will have a free currency. There will be liberalization in their economy and their politics. All will be well. Well, I think we can honestly say that didn't happen. Let's be honest. It was a nice aspiration, but China has become more authoritarian. It is treating minorities, almost with genocidal disrespect, especially with the case of the Uyghurs and the Tibetans, and Hong Kong is another good example. So politically, they're not liberalizing at all. It's going the other way. And economically, rather than acclimating to world institutions, they want to change world institutions or create parallel world institutions that are under their thumb. And so on supply chains, a world where China owns 75% of the supply chain for critical minerals, that's not a good world to be in. The move to net zero, China sees it as first of all, 70% of all energy in China is still coal. Let's make that point. So they make all these promises at the COP26 coming up and whatever, but they're still the major part of the problem. But let's say that they're moving away from coal. They want to do that. They want to move away from oil and fossil fuels because they import most of that. Okay. They import most of that. They are reliant on the rest of the world. If they control the supply chain for clean energy, which is what they want to do, it's part of their 5-year or 10-year plan to have massive worldwide control of batteries, of electric vehicles, all of these solar panels, all these things that are part of net zero. If they control that, they control energy for the world, right? So this is all part of their plans, and I don't begrudge them. I mean, they want to look after the world as they see it, but that's not part of our plans. We have to have different plans, because if we're beholden to their supply chain, they make the rules, and those rules will not benefit Canada. They will not benefit the USA. They will not benefit Europe. They will not benefit Australia. You've seen what's happened to Australia. They had the temerity to suggest that maybe somebody should look into what happened at the Wuhan lab. Yeah. And China just went like lit their hair on fire. And, we're not buying your wine. We're not buying your agricultural products. We're cutting you off, and thank goodness Australia is now part of this quad with India and the US and Japan to try to balance things out in the Pacific again. So I'm basically agreeing with what you're saying. I think a lot of it is going to be around supply chain. What has Joe Biden done? He's done a lot in a few areas, and one of the big areas where he has done a whole lot is on supply chain reviewing the supply chain for the US on critical minerals, reviewing the supply chain for manufacturing, reviewing the supply chain for clean energy. He's doing all those reviews with an idea that the US supply chain has to be much more semiconductors, has to be much more resilient, i.e. away from the thumb of the People's Republic of China. So this is going to be a huge area of geopolitical competition. I'm not saying it's going to be a hot war, but it could be a cold war. And Canada, where do we stand in all this? Right. I used to hear, you stay in the middle of the road. That's only good for white lines and dead skunks. We might have to choose a side here, because being in the middle of the road, we're friends with China, we're friends with our Europe and America, that geopolitically, that may be very untenable for us. So we've got to have, I think, a much more robust policy when it comes to China is the bottom line.
That is riveting. I had not thought of that about the fossil fuel point, and yes, right. I mean, yeah, they have to import most of it, and what is it, Tony? It's the rare earths, right? That China has the real the rare earth minerals. They have a real lock on.
Yeah, lithium and all the, lithium is used in solar panels and electric vehicle batteries. So that's all those metals. So yeah, I think they're around 75% of the global supply chain on that now.
Right. That's an incredible point. And well, I guess the answer to my next question, I think you just gave. We need a robust policy, and we need to pick a lane, right? As a country. On what it's going to be going forward. I mean, it has been a waffle, right, with Chinese policy.
And I just want to make this point again, because the response from industry has been, well, they've got lower labor costs. We have become reliant on getting supply there, but I think that's changing. Transportation costs are a lot higher now from China. And if you build in ESG goals, if that's part of what your shareholders want or what your customers want, they want to know that you're compliant with ESG goals. You got to find a different way than importing stuff from China all the time.
How damaging do you think? Well, I don't want to say damaging. How much of a disadvantage does that create for China? I mean, presumably, if you wanted environmentally sourced products or products that had, say, lower embodied carbon or were capable of higher efficiency, as a Chinese trade guy once told me, in China the answer is always yes.
Yeah.
So it's just a question of what's the price. So there seems to be no reason that you could source those things from China just as easily as here, or do you disagree with that?
Well, I think that there's the environmental goals, and they are striving mightily and quickly to be COP compliant on greenhouse gas emissions and those kinds of things. But don't forget the social and governance part of ESG. So, if you're using Uyghurs as a captive labor force, that has to be included in how we measure the ESG of China. If your governance model is authoritarian, where you're spying on your citizens every second of every day through, this thing, through the little camera on my phone, on my laptop, or the camera on my phone, or that their governance model is hyper authoritarian. So those are also world costs, which again, it's not a government mandate per se, although it's starting to be with COP26 coming up. We'll see, but your customers, like these, the millennials and the Gen Zers and all the people that are going to be buying stuff for the next 40 years, they're demanding this. This is not a nice to get, it's have to get. And as those come to more of a focus, a company that it does not have an ESG plan, you're taking a big risk. And so if China is all your supply chain, and they keep oppressing Uyghurs and the rest of their population through it's basically a surveillance state, then at some point you're going to be called on that if you're getting all of your supply from there.
Another great point. I mean, exactly. All it takes is enough political headwinds getting going here for concern about the Uyghurs. And thanks for bringing that up, by the way. They don't get talked about nearly enough. That you could absolutely face a situation where the government regulations and the answer is, you already have to have a score on your energy efficiency. You're going to have a score on your embodied carbon pretty soon in things that you produce. The day could come very soon that you have to have a score on your ESG profile of,
sure.
of the things that you make, and so
100%.
you could be putting yourself on the wrong side of things if you don't take a look at that. And listen, I don't want this. Well, I kind of do, but I don't want this entirely to be a China bashing session. This isn't a xenophobic thing, as you acknowledged. They're doing what they think is right. They have their own set of priorities. Although I will criticize they're having a president for life all day long.
That was pretty aggressive, wasn't it?
I couldn't believe that. In all honesty, the guy actually got himself written into the Constitution. Anyways, whatever. Good for him, I guess. You would have done it, Tony, if you had to. No, you wouldn't have.
No, I would not.
That's the thing. What's the taking a slightly different tack? What's your sense of the media coverage on supply chain? Is there an ally? Are there allies in the media to advance this issue, or are you seeing? Well, I guess it depends if you're the National Post or if you're the Toronto Star, right? I mean, what's your view? What's the view on protectionism at the Globe? Well, it's one thing, and what's the view on protectionism over here? versus free trade is another. What's your assessment of the landscape there? Can we expect the messaging that the politicians and that people are getting to be supportive of reshoring product?
Yeah, I think the big thing that I've managed over the last 6 months on reshoring is just to make sure that people understand this is not a nativist, make America great again kind of political movement. It's just not that. It's about securing our national security and our health security and our manufacturing. So that's one hill I've had to climb a couple of times. Because now that President Biden has hopped on it, I think it makes it a lot easier to make the case. My interpretation of the media has been there's obviously been a much higher degree of interest. More articles are being written. It's mostly a written word kind of thing. Although there's a lot more interviews that I'm doing myself. And people are sharing interviews that on this topic, so it's becoming more prevalent on television now, and so forth. So I think there's an increased sophistication. We're still not like 100% sophisticated on it, but it's getting better with that regard. It usually is connected to the People's Republic of China issues. Particularly the critical minerals issue. And now it's being, and I'd say in the last few weeks, it's associated with the shortages. So it's less of a geopolitical issue as, holy cow, like things are really expensive. Like, I have to smuggle my 2x4 wood products amongst my cocaine so I can smuggle it. That's a joke, by the way. Anyway, I think I saw that meme.
Yeah.
But you get the idea that it's people in their everyday lives when they're paying $40 for a steak at the grocery store. What is going on here, right? Like this is not normal. So I think that's where it sort of connects with the collective consciousness now, and where the media are going to report it. And as I said, I'm looking very closely at what's happening in the UK as a harbinger of things to come, because their fuel shortage, issue, which was a combination of a number of factors on supply chain, is a full-blown crisis over there. Although it is being alleviated now because Boris Johnson and the government went all hands on deck. But in a sense, it's more. That's the kind of thing that's going to happen, where you have these flash shortages, and then people are going, what's going on? Like, why is this happening? And then it'll come down to supply chain. So there's going to be a lot of education of the public on the importance of supply chains. And, you can see it. You talk to your friends and neighbors. They're a lot more aware of where things are coming from, where their food is coming from, where their products, their manufactured products, where doors and windows, all these things now. There's a lot more of an understanding of where things come from. And generally, it depends on, your level of income, I'm sure. But generally, if you can get a product that is more locally sourced, that is still reasonable in price and cost, you want to go there. You want to go there. Now, it may not be possible, but that's your sort of go-to default position at the very least.
I agree. Well, Terry Adamson has had enough of my wandering mind and my blathering all over creation and into the outer reaches of political philosophy, and would like to know what the hell the forecast is. What Tony? What do you see is likely to happen in terms of adjustments in our supply chain issue, and what would you like to see happen? I guess contrast those two things.
Yeah, I obviously read the party platforms in the last election. Obviously, it's the Liberal Party one that is more relevant now. They had a specific. It was a very specific suggestion on electric vehicle battery supply chain, making sure Canada was part of that, and dealing with the critical minerals issue. We already have an MOU with the American government, the US government, on critical minerals to try to develop a North American-wide supply chain on critical minerals. David Jacobson, the former US ambassador to Canada for Barack Obama, just wrote an op-ed 2 days ago or a day ago for the Globe and Mail saying, yeah, we gotta work together on critical mineral supply chain. So that seems to be the hot one, because that includes the lithium metals for electric vehicle batteries and solar panels. So I do see some movement there. I would like to see a more broad-based strategy on supply chain management. The government of Ontario has created Supply Ontario, which is dedicated to building the supply chain for the Ontario government, but more generally for the Ontario economy. So you're going to see Ontario being more active on supply chains. The government of Quebec is far and away ahead on this stuff. They've been thinking about this for years. I got to give them credit, and they're looking at helping Quebec companies resource, reshore, get a better handle on supply chains. And so this is part of what Francois Legault is doing in the government of Quebec. And we just got an inquiry from the province of Alberta. They're starting to look at supply chains too. So it's starting to happen. And I would just encourage all levels of government to look at supply chains as not only a jobs issue, that's important enough, but obviously national security and national health and welfare. We got to get this right. We can't be in this situation again when we're relying on the good graces of the world to provide us with our vaccines. That's just not acceptable anymore.
Are we going to resolve this thing, Tony? Are a year from now, are we going to be able to get what we want when we want it at the same speed and with the same lead times that we were pre-pandemic?
No. I think the supply chain issues are going to continue to metastasize and replicate, and it's just going to be an issue for the next little while. And I think the changes that are happening, the geopolitical changes, the supply chain changes, tackling the China supply chain, being competitive with them, I think that's a 10-year project, 20-year project. This is just part of the landscape now, and we're just in a different era than we were pre-pandemic. And globalization is still going to be there, and we all still want it to be there, but it's going to be different. It's just going to be different.
On that dark but potentially hopeful. Tony Clement, former industry minister, former health minister, former a lot of things, Treasury Board president. I want to thank you very much for spending time with us and giving us your insights and the benefit of everything you've seen in all those roles over these years. I thought it was tremendously helpful. And thank you so much. And where do people reach out to you and to Reshoring Canada if they want to talk more.
Yeah, I just visit reshoringcanada.ca and you can fire me an email we have the survey there as well. So click on that if you're interested. So, and we also publish news and views on a regular basis.
Everybody rush, run, don't walk to sign up for all of Reshoring Canada's communications. And thanks again to Tony Clement. Thank you. With that, I think we're going to shut down this part of the day. We're moving next to, I believe at 2:00, we're going to have our solar heat gain discussion with some of our Pacific friends. And I don't know, is that you coming in here, Stefan? Did you have something to say, or are we just ready to close it off for now? Oh, the supplier showcase is coming up at 11:30. Don't forget that one, folks. A chance to see what our friends, I believe it's Rhoda. It's
tomorrow. It's going to be tomorrow.
Oh, that's tomorrow. Okay.
At Roto, yeah.
Today. Supplier showcase is tomorrow. Thanks to Rhoda. Thanks to JSA, our sponsors. Stefan, anything else to add?
Well, no, but it's Roto.
No.
ROTO.
Yeah. You know what? I'm thinking of this columnist I have in one of the magazines called Stephanie Rhoda. Anyways, yes,
that's
Rhoda.
why.
That's right. I knew that. Okay, folks. So thanks to everybody, and sorry about that, Roto. and we'll see everyone at 2:00.
Thank you.